While we do that, we've got one question from the audience.
Yeah. The first question is for Shahid. Does the CA19-9 marker need to be done through the treatment in order to assess the progression or regression of the disease, like a tumor marker during the treatment?
So CA19-9 can be raised with cholangiocarcinoma, but it also goes up with biliary obstruction anyway. So there are many benign things that can cause the bile ducts to become obstructed. So, for example, in PSC, people can have stricturing off the bile ducts generally, and even if it's not cancerous, the CA19-9 will go up. So, if however, it is raised due to a cholangiocarcinoma, then yes, it can potentially be a helpful thing in terms of post-resection or surveillance if to look for recurrence. But so we do use it that way, but it's just not as sensitive or specific as we'd like it to be.
So perhaps a hands up, colleagues in the audience, who actually uses CA19-9 to follow our patients? Hands up. Oh, crikey. Okay. Okay, so the vast majority of hands were raised there, not mine. The vast majority of hands were raised there. Thank you very much. I don't know who was first, Julien or Julien Adeline from Nantes. Good morning, Julien.
Thank you. Very nice data and very important. And we had a similar statistic in France and striking similar proportion of patients that did not receive any treatment, including stenting. We also had another important data, I think, which was the majority of patients diagnosed with cholangio in France were diagnosed in centers that diagnose either 1 or 2 cholangiocarcinoma per year. And in these centers, there were a lower proportion of treatment. And of course, the question here is whether these patients do not have access to treatment that they should have, or whether these patients were not able to receive any specialized treatment and were never received to referred to specialized centers. Do you have any data about this kind of case loads for diagnosis of cholangio?
Yeah, it's something we could figure out. We didn't do it as part of this analysis. Largely to keep populations large enough, we use Cancer Alliance, which is quite a broad geographic area and was based on where someone lives, not necessarily where they were seen. But that data is available and is something that could be delved into. We did sort of try and cross-reference the Cancer Alliances that showed to vary with where we thought centres of, good knowledge for cholangiocarcinoma currently were, and we didn't see a direct correlation. But yeah, that would be really interesting to look at.
The parallel question is really your funnel plot. I don't know if you can go back to the funnel plot. You know the one, the funnel plot on the, here we are, that for instance, that one really. Is there any similarity in the dots below the line? Are they all north of Watford?
No, they're not all the same
Okay.
one. No.
So,
yeah. It's quite hard to actually match up where, yeah.
Okay, so there is a postcode lottery, but it's not
a clear one.
It's not clear. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Juan Valle.
Thank you, Sophie. Fantastic presentation, and congratulations to AMMF for commissioning the work. I think it's very important, and I'm looking forward, I hope, at some point, receiving the results of the data for our own Cancer Alliance. And I think this needs to go out with a call to action, with an action plan for each Cancer Alliance to be able to address, find out where they are on these plots, why they're outliers, and really to be able to then drive up and improve standards. So I'm not sure if the plans are to de-anonymize it on an individual level for the Cancer Alliances, but if not, I'd encourage that to happen.
Yes, no, the Cancer Alliances are mentioned by name in terms of the publications that will be going out, so Cancer Alliances can identify themselves, but with such a short amount of time, we don't generally want to focus on, because there are going to be multifactorial reasons as to why someone might be below or above the significance threshold. But yeah.
I'll just say it's not about naming and shaming. It is, as I'm sure you'd agree, Juan, it is about levelling up. And by levelling up, I mean levelling up not when the government talks about levelling up, they really mean levelling down. But it really is about levelling up, and there may be. We have to accept there may actually be, as Sophie mentioned, some local factors. So some populations in some areas may actually, for other reasons, may have higher comorbidities or whatever. There might be other reasons why they might not be getting treatment. But so we have to keep an open mind. But it is something that needs to be looked at. And again, I think you're right. We need to level it up so we get equity. And again, the socio-economic, the more deprived you are, if you're lower socio-economic group, you have a higher chance of getting and dying from cholangio. Now, we know that's not a surprise. We know that for so many diseases. But it's still an important finding, It's not right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hans-Josef Klumpen from the Netherlands.
Thank you. I just wanted to add something which I learned from my surgeon, and that is cholangiocarcinoma is very easy to compare to esophageal cancer, and because of the location and how crucial it is, if there is a small change at that location, the patient is really suffering and deteriorating very quickly. And that's where there's a big parallel between those diseases in terms of prognosis and of treatment. And that was an eye-opener to me, to be honest, and I just wanted to share that with you. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of patients will not get treatment. Thank you.
Angela Lamarca, Madrid,
Yes,
Spain.
thank you. Linked to that and a little bit to the ongoing discussion, I think all this data is really supporting the fact that we need centers with expertise treating these patients. How challenging it is to define a center with an expertise. That's probably one of the challenges that we have. But I really wanted to say, Helen, the work you are doing and the AMMF is fantastic. It's not only helping UK, it's also helping other countries. Because definition of centers of excellence is challenging. In this country, patients can travel more than what they can travel in other countries for seeking healthcare. So that's something to take into account, and developing these centers could allow that to happen. So very interesting data.
I've got a question for both Sophie and Shahid. So if I were a reviewer looking at these publications, the single top question I would have through all of it is, how confident are you about the data? How good are they? How much better can they be? What are your levels of uncertainty?
So, I mean, the data are very high quality in terms of the cancer registration data, and hospital episode statistics obviously is a widely used data set. So they're very high quality in terms of what we have. There is some data that we would like to have to better adjust for things like stage. That, as I mentioned, that's quite high levels of missing data. So yeah, there's sort of some questions that could be better answered with further adjustment, as is always the case, because it's routinely collected data. It's very high quality in what we have, but that we would like to have more of it in terms of specifically trying to answer these questions. But yeah, it is very robust data.
Basically, within the field, this data is as good as it gets. I'm not saying that because I'm involved. It's because of people like Sophie and the team at Public Health England and NCRAS, and the quality of the data. And really, it was so, for me, I mean, you could say that Helen and I might have an agenda, but these guys don't have an agenda. Their agenda is the truth, and and there's nothing else that matters. And our registration, cancer registration service, maybe not the best in the world, but it's it's up there.
Yeah.
It's up there. It's not maybe quite as good as Denmark, but Denmark has a population of like a few million. So it's as good as you get, I think.
Okay,
as you can get.
So that message must go out extremely strongly. Okay, this is as good as it gets. Okay, you will not get any. There's no second guessing.
In terms of population level data, obviously, if you do a 5-center study, you can drill down into individual cases, but at a national level, that's not possible. But in terms of national level data, this is as good as it gets.
So I think that must be emphasised really, really strongly. Yeah. Thank you. Hassan Malik.
Hi guys. I think as a surgeon, the one thing I do want to tease out is the management of perihilar cholangiocarcinoma, because ultimately we rarely would operate on a jaundiced patient without a stent. And if you look at the proportion of patients who had a stent and an operation, that's only about 3 or 4% of the total population. And we know that the perihilar group is probably the majority of patients with cholangiocarcinoma. So although there's perhaps a false reassurance that there is not a variability in the surgery amongst alliances, but we haven't teased out surgery for perihilar cholangiocarcinoma. And certainly as you work towards the publications, it may be worth looking to tease that out, because I suspect it's going to be more akin to the variabilities you see for stenting.
Yeah, so unfortunately, because of the current definitions for cholangiocarcinoma and ICD-10, it's really difficult to accurately pick out perihilar on its own. We have done sensitivity analysis where we've split by intrahepatic and extrahepatic, which is the best sort of grouping that we can get reliably for cholangiocarcinoma, and yeah, so that will be
So
picked up in
exactly,
the
so that's been the
publication.
issue, Hassan, is that there's a code for intrahepatic, there's a code for extrahepatic, but there isn't a code for perihilar until now, and there will be, but historically there hasn't been. And that's why we've just not been able to get that data.
No, I agree, but I think if you link the treatment codes, stenting with surgery, you've got a group of patients you want to identify.
Hassan, stay there a second. So 12% curative surgery. Does that feel right? 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's an average, isn't it? And you'll have centres that do more and less. I mean, in Liverpool, it's around 20% from our tumour board who will have an
Bearing in
operation.
mind 50% don't get anything.
Yeah, and I suspect in a lot of places, people with perihilar obstruction just won't get stented because they don't have the expertise, the endobiliary expertise. You know, in terms of, Sophie, in terms of teasing out the operation codes at a national level, on what Hassan is saying, is that we have sort of discussed that before, and it was sort of deemed to be technically quite difficult to do.
Yeah, so we have operation codes, so it's technically feasible to split out by the type of operation. But yeah, you get into quite small numbers quite quickly, I think. But yeah.
Okay, just a couple more questions online before we move to our next speaker, please. Dear Sophie and Shahid, do the instance data represent only histology-proven cholangiocarcinomas, or do you include people with, you know, just a scan?
So it will be anyone who is registered in the registry, which, I mean, histology is the best quality evidence that we'd usually take, but if we don't have histology, we can still register a tumour without it.
So if their clinical team had diagnosed them with cholangiocarcinoma, we took that as they've got cholangiocarcinoma. So not all of those cases were histology evidenced.
But once again, it'd be good to get a feel for, because
Yeah,
we
so-
know there's lots of people out there who just have a scan and you don't bother to get them.
So the overall frequency of histology is probably less than 50%, but has increased over time. And so you know, many patients don't get histology. But they might die and be classified as cholangiocarcinoma. But yeah, the percentage of patients who get definitive histology is not the majority, but it is increasing as a proportion over the past 20 years.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. We have to move to the next session. We have more questions, but again, as yesterday we said, we can discuss during the network breaks. So thank you so much.